Welcome to the March 3rd meeting of the members of the Water Board. For the record, members Cirilli, Golden, Freed, and Connie are here. And we are missing members Fernandez Ketchum, G.K. Shu, and Arlene Shaw. Also, for the record, the board secretary is with us today. Omar has agreed to keep whatever record needs to be kept because the meeting is being recorded. So we're under control. Brief meeting today, I think. We'll begin with the first agenda item, which is the approval of minutes. December 6th.
Should we, just as a point of order, should we call the roll formally? Before the proceedings of the minutes. I'm trying to mimic Al's closely as I can. So should we do the roll call? Redundant though it may be. Chairman Carney.
I'm here.
Member Fernandez Ketchum. Member Freed.
Present.
Member Golden.
Here.
Member Zhu. Member Shaw. Member Zuko.
Here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. We're going to vote on the minutes. Everybody's had a chance to review them. They were very detailed this time around, and I thought very well done. I mean, they always are. This was a particularly, it was an interesting meeting because we were considering something that was fairly new to all of us, and the minutes reflected great questions, great answers, and on and on. Are there any recommended revisions? Hearing none, I have a motion to approve the minutes. Thank you, Adam. Is there a second?
Second.
Dan, thank you very much. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Are there any opposed of the four of us? And is anyone abstaining? Thank you. The second agenda item is actually one that I think we all smile about. It's a great idea. We're going to consider approving if the resolution which is adopted will result in a consulting agreement with the former chair, Vincent Seppian. I think we've all had a chance to look at the resolution. Are there any questions about it? Okay. I don't have any questions. May I have a motion please to approve?
So moved.
Thank you, Adam. Your second.
Second.
John, thank you. All in favor, please indicate aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes unanimously. It would be nice to have a former Commissioner Seppian.
Be very good to keep Denise and Price around the agency as long as we possibly can. So thank you.
All right. The third and final agenda item is a presentation on the 2023 priorities of the Department of Environment Protection. And I believe the Commissioner is going to start there.
Yes. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all. And in part, I thought we would make it worth your trip downtown to get a little more content than the two business items that took you all 3 minutes. So, but also, I thought it made sense, especially as we are looking ahead to the rate-setting season, to make sure that you enter that with a full perspective on what we've done at DEP over the last year and what we see our top priorities are. And so what I'm actually sharing with you, and by inference then with the public, is a pretty much the same document that I presented to an all-hands town hall that we did remotely a couple of weeks ago, which was actually really exciting. 5,400 staff members at DEP, many of whom are in the field and in motion at any given time. Of course, there's no convenient moment. You can't get everybody in the same room. But we had north of 1,500 people tuning in live to the video stream, which is a really big deal, a really high percentage for something like that. And of course, I don't have numbers of whether people have downloaded it since, of course, they're also making it available. But here again, the same content really to share with you, because I think it's the same story is true for everybody, and there's nothing secret when you present it to 1,500 members of your staff. So it wasn't particularly sensitive or privileged or anything. And of course, as Steve, we have to make as much transparency as possible. So I'm pleased to walk you through this and happy to take any questions. So just quickly, we had a great year. One of the things is, as you've heard me said, is I felt very supported by Mayor Adams. He's been highly supportive of things like bringing a rate hike to you last year and ensuring that we take care of the asset and make sure that the agency's revenues are as healthy as they need to be. He's been deeply engaged in our discussions that informed what you voted on in December in terms of the amnesty program and the need to manage our accounts receivable. That's something he's engaged with me directly on. And of course, he's been quite present at a number of our things. Unfortunately, you always get the mayor to show up when something goes wrong. So these were 3 difficult days over the last year. But nonetheless, in general, I'm happy to say they all resolved pretty well. And particularly, the one on the left-hand side of the Wrangell houses. That was my second week on the job and my first Saturday phone call for a major water break. And the fantastic thing about it was that the water went off at the Wrangell houses. It's several hundred apartments in Upper Manhattan on a Friday night in February last year when it was actually quite cold, unlike this winter. And the crew worked all night. We got it on mid-morning. And at about noon, the mayor arrived and we had a meeting with the Tenants Association. And the Tenants Association said, oh, the DEP crew, we saw them working all night. We have no complaints about DEP. They did their job. And that was, I think, a really great testament and an example of the fact that no matter what happens, the men and women at DEP, they're always there and they are doing their job. And it's not always easy because stuff does go wrong, but they do great work. We had a number of accomplishments, some of them just kind of the normal excellence that we take for granted in New York City of delivering water and maintaining the network and treating all of our water. A couple of milestones that we've reached across the agency. You may know that in fact the filtration avoidance determination, with which we're all very familiar, and is really important, of course, to the organization, had a midpoint review. It's a 10-year agreement, but at the midpoint of that agreement, there is built in a review process with the State Department of Health. We completed that, and on December 28th, the revised FAD was issued, so we have clarity now for the next 5 years. The main change there is a reduction in our requirements in terms of land acquisition based on the results of the National Academy of Sciences work that was done 2 years ago that demonstrated that given that we now own roughly more than a third of the land in the watershed, that we are reaching a point where additional land ownership is not necessarily going to result in significant improvements to water quality. The reorientation is a focus on very targeted efforts to protect shorelines, so streams and the banks and shores and things that have direct impact on the water, and of course a continued focus on the existing land acquisition targets east of Hudson, which are very important. We established a new watershed maintainer title, of course, as well up there, and you can read faster than I can speak. But another significant component was this last year getting up to full staff on sewage treatment workers for the first time in several years, thanks to a special allotment that Deputy Mayor Mira Joshi went to bat for us on back when we were still under the hiring constraints last year. And over several months, we've gotten to the point where now with the treatment plants, we have a full staff of treatment workers, which allows us to do all of the preventative maintenance that we wanted to do. Whereas over the last couple of years, staffing shortages had led us to have a switch where we had to prioritize emergency maintenance. The more you prioritize emergency maintenance and don't do preventative maintenance, the more emergency maintenance you have to do, right? And so now we are catching up, and I've been to all but one of our treatment plants, and the consistent feedback is people are definitely feeling the sense that they have the staff on hand to do the work.
Quick question on the lead service line replacement. That's an open trench cut there. Are you guys also experimenting with directional drilling or any other ways of not having to do open cuts?
So
So I'm sorry,
That would be-
direction driven?
Where you can force the line in through, and do underground without having to open up.
I see, okay.
So, that would be a massive service line.
Well, I wasn't
That-
sure
that
if
is
you were
not-
going to
that
work
is-
there as
that is-
well.
That is an image
Yeah.
of some work we did in the Hole and the Jewel Streets,
Okay,
a neighborhood on the Brooklyn-Queens border near Lincoln Boulevard that has some chronic flooding, and that's an image of a quick fix that BWSO was able to do that has, the community has really appreciated it, but just creatively, we went in with the BWSO crew and found a creative way to create some additional drainage in this area that is 15 feet below legal grade, and it's chronically flooding. It will require a major project, Blue Bell solution for that neighborhood. I don't know that we've actually looked into directional drilling. I will find out. In any case. Moving right along, we've got a number of other things that, including, auto pay and amnesty, as we talked about, and I think you're aware of the flood barrier distribution we did last year as part of Rainfall Ready, which I've characterized as a Band-Aid, because it is. It's something that protects you from things going bad while you are healing. And of course, we know that long-term climate resilience is going to be a long, drawn-out, very expensive process. But in the meantime, we have to help New Yorkers protect their property, protect their lives as much as we possibly can. So we did that. Overall, most of this is just a sample of our MMR metrics, and in general, we're doing pretty well. As you can see, one that was trending in the wrong direction between target and actual 22 is sewer backup resolution time. I need to remind you that FY22 kind of started out with Hurricanes Henri and Ida, and so a number of those BWSO specific reaction metrics really were haywire because for a month there was nothing but cleanup going on. So I think that as we look at year to date for FY23, we are back to trend on most of those BWSO metrics. And you have the document, so I'm going to keep going, and you can look at the specifics if you'd like. Just thinking about going forward, 4 things that I characterize as shaping the way we're thinking about things. Obviously, recovering from the pandemic, the macroeconomic conditions that everybody faces, but affect us like everybody else. Equity as an imperative in climate change, of course. In terms of recovering from the pandemic, we have, and we talked about this at length in the December meeting. You see in the accounts receivable, one of the major impacts, that the impact on our ratepayers did slow down or prevent people from paying their bills, some of them because of cash management, some because of genuine economic hardship, but that's one of them. Of course, within DEP, as is well known across city government, individuals were impacted. The shift to remote work for half of our workforce, but not the other half, and the shift back to 5 days in the office. And of course, the contrast that has had with the broader economy has led to some significant losses. Hiring and promotions, of course, during a chunk of the pandemic, there was no hiring going on and no promotions were allowed. Last year, that eased up a little bit, and now finally, towards the end of last year, we got the green light to resume normal hiring and promotion activity. And so we are now looking forward. 2023 is going to be a year of aggressive recruiting and the continuation. And of course, during that, we had to continue essential operations.
Is there, on that second column, on the workplace challenges, is anything about the DC 37 remote work pilot, sort of, will that have benefit to DEP? Or is that at least a trend that could have a benefit to DEP?
Well, it is pilot, so we will see.
Yeah.
I don't have an update on who or what teams from DEP are going to be involved, if any. But we are highly enthusiastic about this development because, in particular, across city government, and DEP is no exception. We are struggling to hire and retain engineers and lawyers, particularly. We do a lot of engineering, and we write a lot of contracts. And so if we are short engineers and lawyers, it hurts. So that is, and those are two fields that have really, in the private sector, have embraced remote work, and that puts us at a disadvantage even more than a traditional salary disadvantage.
Dan, would you tell us a bit about the program? I'm unclear.
I mean, this is an announcement from Mayor Adams and DC 37 as part
Yeah,
of the contract negotiations. I don't see
Joe,
those
do
in
you,
the press.
probably
Yeah, I
know
think the intent
specifics.
is, as in the private sector, where they would offer, the work from home, option, where, as long as it worked within the schedule of the employee, and we learned that during the pandemic, many of our titles, such as engineers, even the attorneys, administrative staff, were able to do that and pivot very effectively back and forth from working remotely, from, working also in the office. I think the intent is to start it as they're going to select a few agencies. That's between OOR and DC 37, and the mayor's office, of course. And then, I think the intent will be to roll it out if it goes successfully, probably soon thereafter. I don't think they're going to have a long time for this test period to the rest of the city agencies as well. And I think it's going to be 1 day a week is what they're talking about now. And that would be, variable. People would say, well, I'm going to do a Wednesday, working within the schedules, making sure that coverage was there. Again, to the commissioner's point too, the optionality is not there for us in all of our field operations. So, I think that was very hard for them to bridge between that across all of the various locals in terms of saying how are we benefiting the rest of them. I think that's where some of the other elements, such as the $3,000 bonus that we're looking at, came into play as well.
One of the interesting things, we did an agency-wide morale survey last summer. It got very good, and we made sure we did it both electronically and paper to get a good representation from the field staff. We had about 25% participation from the field staff, which was really quite good. And one of the things that was really interesting to me is that morale is higher among the field staff than it is among the office-based staff. And at least, and we'll do it again this summer, so we can do a year-to-year comparison. But one of the things that I infer from some of the questions, some of the answers that we got, is that our field staff work on shifts. If they need to be home on Wednesday at noon because of something related to family or the carpenter showing up or whatever, they can rearrange their schedule and still work a full week's work. If you are at a call center, if you're on a legal team, whatever, you don't have that optionality. If you need to be home at noon on Wednesday, you're taking the day off, right? And that is, I think, part of it, because it's not necessarily that people want to sit home and do work in sweatpants and pajamas. It's that they are trying to manage all of the other stuff. So I think we'll be very excited, and I can promise you that whatever flexibility we have, we're going to do whatever we can.
Thank you.
So a number of macroeconomic issues that take the agency, of course, again, the delinquency, inflation, citywide, we see still impacts. Of course, a lot of New York City is back in terms of tourism and other things, but still we have some lingering impacts. Our borrowing costs, and I see David's here, have increased. This is not a dramatic impact on us yet, because it's still only a portion of our total bond portfolio, but we do see the changing inflation and interest rates impacting our own economics. That does suggest, I don't have any news yet, but it does suggest that we will not be in a zero rate hike environment this year. And there is, of course, and we're quite cognizant of that along with pressure both internally in terms of the city budget and the need perhaps to seek a rate hike, that there will be greater scrutiny on our expense and capital budget. So we are going to have to work hard to justify that. As you know, that is one of the key reasons that we are undertaking the strategic plan that you all agreed to fund. And of course, in a couple of months, we will be giving you an update on. We know that part of the mayor's clear directive to us, but also values that we hold ourselves, is ensuring that we have a focus on improving equity. We, and I personally, played a direct role in the state cumulative impacts law that was enacted last year and which the governor signed on the 30th of December. And that will have some impacts on us. That requires all projects requiring an EIS located in an environmental justice neighborhood to do a cumulative impacts assessment as part of that EIS. Of course, the majority of of DEPs in city facilities are in EJ neighborhoods, and so that will have an impact on us. But actually, I will say we work very closely with the governor's office and with the legislature and a number of EJ groups to create a set of chapter amendments that have now passed the legislature to ensure that the objective of this law was maintained, but some of the unintended byproducts that could have been a real problem for us were avoided. So really pleased about that. And I think DEP, along with the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice, will probably play a leading role in implementing this, not only for the agency, but across the government. We have to be thinking about equity when it comes to resilience, like DEP's Cloudburst program, of course, in terms of workforce diversity. There is, of course, an EJ component to what you all approved in December in terms of matching LILAP. Of course, we know there is a high correlation between people who live in EJ neighborhoods and, of course, equity is not just about environmental injustice. So the work we've done with LILAP Plus, I think, is great. And one of the other things that I think we need to take much more seriously is recognizing the fact that traditionally we have sought to build our water supply infrastructure for the ages. We have built our water distribution infrastructure for the ages. We have built our water treatment infrastructure to meet the regulation. And I think we need to think a little bit more ambitiously about that. And one of the reasons for that is that at least I would say 12 of our 14 plants are in EJ neighborhoods. And so when something goes wrong at those plants, the first people who suffer are our own employees who have a situation that they've got to remedy. The second people who suffer are actually the neighbors, right? Usually with odor or other impacts that spill out. And so I think we have to think about the state of good repair and the overall performance of our treatment plants themselves as an equity issue. So that is something that we will be doing going forward. And then, of course, I do not have to tell you all about the challenges that climate change is causing us, and this is just one example of how Maria and Ida broke the mold. But as we've discussed in the past, one of the things that I thought was most significant about 2022 is there were 3 separate rainstorms in 2022 that, but for Ida, would have been record-setting rainstorms. Right? And so we cannot think about Aubrey and Ida as one-offs that won't come back because they're a quote-unquote 100-year storm, they're not going to come back. Those are storms that we probably will have several of this summer. Right? Not Ida, I hope, but more on the level of Aubrey. And so 4 things, 4 challenges, so 4 things we're thinking about in terms of our people. We've placed a significant focus over the last year, and we will going forward in taking care of our people, recognizing them. We've done very proud of the fact that we processed 871 promotions and salary adjustments out of the 5,400 person agency last year. That's a big deal. People really appreciate getting recognized. As you know, in many cases, the amount of money we are talking about at the individual paycheck level is quite small. The gesture that people value is very big. Similarly, people expressed one of the areas, particularly among our white collar workforce, that was an issue was professional development. That was noted on our morale surveys, so we worked on that, including encouraging people to attend conferences, not just at the senior level within a bureau, but ensuring that we've got mid-level and junior people getting those professional development opportunities. I tell everybody that the Department of Health will make sure that we maintain the reservoirs. Council members will make sure that we are repairing water main breaks quickly. DEC and EPA will make sure that we are doing our job when it comes to treatment plants. Nobody will call us if the locker rooms at one of our treatment plants or our repair yards are disgusting. Right? That is only on us. That is between us and our employees. And so one of the things that we have undertaken is an effort to improve the quality of life for our workforce by investing in bathrooms, locker rooms, laundry facilities, things that only our staff will see at our workplaces. And that's actually very important to me because that is a gesture that people appreciate, they understand that language. And we are doing a whole set of things around flexibility. DEP police, we've allowed them to have some gym time, which had not been previous practice. We got mayoral approval to implement an approach to allow people to do overtime from home. So even though they're doing their 35 hours a week in the office, if they are doing overtime in the evening or on the weekend, they can do that from home. One of the things we've done to implement the amnesty program is we've opened our call center on Saturday for the first time. That is Saturdays, our call center folks are doing it from home. We would not have the volunteers in the same way if we asked them to come into the office on a Saturday, right? And it works really well, it's a win-win, we don't see a real productivity problem, particularly on something like call centers, which have been distributed and work from home for 20 years in the private sector. That's been a great thing. As I've said, this year, one of our biggest focuses is going to be on recruiting, and in fact, as we've been going through establishing personal targets for 2023, one of my personal targets is going to be around hiring a specific number of people, particularly in key roles, and that's going to be a target for 2023 that's going to be shared with several of the senior staff.
Joe, you and Omar actually announced the number previously. I just don't recall it. How did you acquire the proposal?
Oh, I would say it's about 100, just off the top of my head, but I could get you that number.
I
But
would love to know. I think you've told us before. I just can't remember.
And we did have, similar to as the commissioner said, we had a bit of a lull where we were having
Sure.
difficult recruitment time. We worked closely with OMB in terms of now that the hiring freeze is lifted, that we were able to enhance the level that we got for that, and we hired about 20 of them just in the last week of it being a month.
We hired 20 people in January. We were able to increase the salaries for all of our call center reps, so that they made some more money, and that allowed us to pull some more people off the list. We actually scheduled the amnesty to start on the 30th of January because we got a new tranche of people in mid-January, and so we knew we needed to have a fully staffed call center. So I had told you we were aiming for January 15th. We actually started it on January 30th because we needed to get the call center fully staffed.
And training. When people call in, they're obviously calling, well, not all of them, but many are calling in because they have issues. And they are probably a bit troubled by those issues. The attitude, the tone that our call center people get here is probably high pitched. Do they get any training? Are they learning? Are they taught how to bring that level of emotion down so that they can have a conversation with the caller?
Definitely, and they also know how to escalate as well. So if they have someone that's having a problem, it's like say, all right, well, let me get a supervisor they can talk to as well, because you have many calls that are just very straightforward, pretty easy to take. They can be done in a couple of minutes. You could have very complex either problem or someone that's got an issue, which may be like something that their bill is 3 times what it should be, just for argument's sake, whatever. So they can be very upset. Most of our call takers can take care of that. But then if it is something that's more there, the more senior people will be routed to handle those calls as well, because they have experience doing that.
True.
So that's part of what the commissioner said too. We're trying to make sure we have that recognition of the staff that as they have that expertise, they're given the appropriate recompense to be, for their experience as well.
Makes sense.
I've used the call center twice, both times they've been excellent on that.
You
But
used it?
for other people who needed help, I
Is that
said that I figured let me see what it's like, and they were amazing. Never said I was a water board member, but they were great. Quick question, you mentioned 5,400 people in DEP. What percent of that is water, stormwater oriented versus air quality and some of the other environmental issues that you deal with in the agency?
It's really, on the air quality for the Bureau of Environmental conservation,
Compliance.
environmental compliance, yeah. They're probably about 500-ish or so. And a lot of that is, you know, the inspection staff, you know, you have the air noise, and, you know, and that realm as well. You know, then when you get into the realm between wastewater, water supply and water and sewer operations, I mean, wastewater is about 2,000, just under, and the other two bureaus are about combined, probably closer to like 2,000 between the two of them. You know, with, you know, about 1,000 upstate and 1,000 in city.
And might we spend some time, Joe, Omar, not necessarily after this meeting, but sometime before the next meeting, talking a bit about how that 5,400 number gets sliced and diced. That is, of that number, how many are minorities, how many are women, just to get a sense of what our workforce looks like.
Okay, we could get you that because, you know, we have our budget hearing next Tuesday. And usually when we
Gotta have
get,
it for that.
we usually, yeah, we do get a question about diversity in the makeup of, so we
Sure.
have a table for that we can send you as well.
So let's see, our capital plan, of course, is one of, DEP is a capital agency. Much of what we do is about investing in and maintaining the asset. And so this is critical. I'm very pleased about the fact that since we last met, you see in the mayor's January plan, the 10-year capital plan is now $31 billion. Very excited about the fact that a lot of that is front-loaded. So if the January plan holds, then we will have $3 billion a year years coming up. After this year, when we have had a $2.1 billion capital plan for FY23. I'm very pleased to say that one of the things we have worked on great seriousness over the last year has been improving our commitment rate. Last year, unfortunately, in part due to the pandemic's impacts, in part due to the new passport purchasing system governing all citywide procurement, we, like several other agencies, were well below our commitment rate, so we actually only spent less than 2/3 of our capital budget. This year, I'm pleased to say, we're 2/3 through the fiscal year, and we have actually spent 2/3 of our capital budget. It never happens. It's always a big uptick at the end. So we are, in fact, tracking to be at 100%. And we will have to continue that because, as I routinely point out, not only can we not maintain the asset, but we certainly cannot achieve resilience for New York City. If DEP cannot get into the habit of spending $3 or perhaps even more than $3 billion a year, that is what it is. So you see a couple of key things. One thing I will also point out is, happily, as you know, one of our big tasks this year is finishing BT2, finishing the Delaware Aqueduct repair, which, as you know, we had to postpone last year because of some concerns about the throughput of the carbon that we use at the product filtration plant. And because that was in cold weather not yielding the throughput that we were expecting, the concern was that if you had to rely on the Croton and Catskill water, we might actually have low pressure situations on cold periods. Happy to report that we swapped out that activated carbon to a different grain that allows a higher throughput. We are in the midst of a 2-week test of running that plant at absolute full capacity, and we are exceeding our targets. So it's obviously we will make a decision probably June is the timeline when we have to make the final go-no-go decision. But I'm pleased to report that it is looking quite positive.
Good luck.
Thank you. That's big.
It's interesting that just changing the grain of the carbon would actually give you a better output.
Well,
I would never
it's-
guess that.
Yeah, it's the balancing. If you just think about how tightly packed the carbon is,
Yes.
right, and the space between it. Obviously, you do more filtration, the more stuff gets in the way of the water,
Sure.
but it's balanced by lower flow.
Wow.
Right,
Thank you for
so we
explaining.
had to find the right balance. Still got all the filtration we needed, and we're quite pleased. In fact, With this, one of the nice things is we have, over the last 2 weeks, been sending a lot more Croton water to New Yorkers. Nobody's noticed the change, so clearly our filters are working. These people have not said, oh, this tastes different. We haven't done this.
Thank you.
I don't have to tell you all about the amnesty program because you approved it, other than on the right-hand side to give you a quick update. We did start on January 30th, as I said. We've done outbound letter and email outreach to 52,000 customers, our most seriously delinquent. We did an email and letter outreach to the LILAP and HDFC eligible customers, and we are working through outbound calls to those customers, in part using these new CSRs that we've got. We're doing some mailings. We've done some earned media on that. As I said, we've expanded the hours of our call center. It's still very early, of course. This kind of thing, it takes a while to get people aware of it, so you never expect the response to be immediate. You expect it to ramp up over time, and so you're bracing for the fact that April should be a month of a lot of inbound phone calls. But in our first 2 weeks, we saw weekly call volume overall go up by 12%, which I'm very enthusiastic about. And we actually have seen, I think, a noticeable increase that our revenues are running ahead of plan quite measurably. So that's a good thing.
And Drew, I don't have our calendar on the top of my head of when our next meetings are, but in the event that, given that this expires April 30th, if it makes sense to have an email update just on the numbers of that, I'd be curious, given that you have a letter. It sounds like you guys are very much on top of it and have those flags put in, which would be curious.
Fair point.
The next meeting is in calendar. It'll probably be the same. It'll probably be the 3rd or 4th week of April, but it's not.
Yeah, so if we could get an update at some point in the interim, we'd just be curious to see how the numbers are trending.
And then, we've got a number of strategic planning efforts underway. Again, as I said, we've started our DEP strategic plan with the consultants that were selected, thanks to your support last fall. That is now a couple of weeks into operation. There'll be an update for you all as we've agreed, probably mid-year this year. And then the strategic rate study is also proceeding apace. We have a major effort underway to do stormwater resilience planning across the city, and I think one of the things we will spend a lot of time, we'll certainly be briefing you on, and there's a lot to be discussed in the public, is what the alternatives will be, because of course stormwater resilience will not be cheap. And everybody wants everything to be protected, which is great, until we realize what that might mean for the water rate. And so part of what we have to do is come up with a couple of alternatives and help people understand what the impacts are for given locations, for what it means for their buildings, and how they have to protect their homes, but also what it means for water bills.
Do we have any clarity yet on the impact of the State Water Bond Act and Inflation Reduction Act and infrastructure federal funds, on how that will play into these sort of capital, needs on the rate?
So, I guess the thing we have to start with is remembering that it will never be enough. Right? So, the State Bond Act was $4.1 billion. Let us assume in a perfect world that New York City, with 48% of the state's population, gets 48% of that money, which never happens, right? That's $2 billion, right? As you well know, Dan, in the aftermath of Hurricane Ida, the de Blasio administration gave DEP $2 billion for stormwater work. That's a handful of projects of the scale that we need, right? So I think the reality is we are, and we can talk about this at the meeting next time, we are doing everything we can to maximize the money we get from the federal programs, the EIL and the IRA, as well as from the state. We are up against some, really at the state level, some pretty ingrained biases. We had one example last fall where there is a state pot of money for clean water infrastructure, a $250 million pot of money. New York City applied for half of it, and we got $6 million. right? So 48% of the state's population got 3% of the money. Now, it turns out we were being a little cheeky, knowingly so, about applying for half of it, because the law that enables that places a cap of $10 million per municipality. So the state law said that there must be inequity and New York City must not get its fair share. And then on top of it, by rule, the state decided they would impose a further cap of $5 million. And so we got $6 million over 2 years, not $6 million a year. Right? That is the kind of problem that we are up against. It's going to be one of our key. I submitted testimony to the state Senate Environment Committee in January. My main point was the fact that we have to get our fair share of all of this money. And it's a point we're going to be making. We're also going to be we are very aggressive. Joe and his team participate in a weekly meeting that Deputy Mayor Joshi's office convenes across city agencies to ensure that we are going after every available federal grant. We've been somewhat successful. A lot of the money thus far that has come out of BIL still has been through the CDBG program. So from a citywide perspective, most of the resilience money has been has been invested in NYCHA, which has done phenomenal work. Again, nobody knows more about this than we can in terms of hardening NYCHA facilities for resilience. Some of that has come into projects that we are involved in, so there has been some federal money in some of the initial cloudburst projects at the South Jamaica houses. And in fact, one of the things we are doing is we've identified a BRIC funding opportunity under the BIL where one of the cloudburst programs can get funded. So we did the two that were set up and going to happen before Hurricane Ida. The post-Ida plan committed to doing 4 and funded 4. We announced those 4 a couple of weeks ago. We also went ahead and completed design on a 5th one in Brownsville that we think is going to be eligible, and we are submitting a BRIC funding proposal for that. And then there are another 26 potential locations, and we are going to proceed with design because we think all of them could be grant funded potentially.
And I'll add, if I may, Commissioner, too, we are proceeding with the grants administration RFP. So we have done the solicitation, and I believe they're due back to us March 15th. So we should be able to do an assessment and have someone choose, an entity chosen that can help, Lonnie Conyers and the grants management team out with, the volume of stuff that's there. But we've been trying, as the Commissioner said, we've been staying on top of the City Hall's been very, very engaged in helping us, do that.
And hopefully at our next meeting, and if it is in late April, as Omar suggested, we will know the results of the first BIL competitive application, which is for lead service lines. And that is money that was given to the state. The state set up a competitive grant program. We again applied for precisely 50% of the state's money. One of the things that we will be eagerly watching for is that the BIL created that program to be half grants and half loans. I'm a little bit worried that somebody might say, oh, well, we'll give you all of the loans and give everybody else the grants. We've applied explicitly for half of the grants and half of the loans. But we shall see.
But we certainly want to see the city get its fair share on this. I don't know if there's any way that the board itself can lend its voice and support on that as well, whether a resolution or complimentary letters that you're submitting to the agencies. We'd certainly be interested in exploring that if we could.
Certainly something we can talk about.
So one other piece is you're thinking about, and really applaud your creativity, but also the pressure you're on of the unprecedented need that we're facing and rethinking how we're working stormwater and resiliency. And I know you talked about the strategic plan. As part of that, I'm wondering if it's possible for us to, should we be thinking about the powers and responsibilities of the water board as well, and what those look like, and whether or not institutions are so important to help set the pathway for what needs to be done. Just making sure we have a full understanding of what that is, and if there's anything that we think about changing or be creative in our roles in helping you better meet the needs that are increasingly present. I think we've done that probably about a decade ago when I first joined, but it's been a while. We have a number of new members and a new vision for DEP. So I wonder if that's something that our Secretary's not here, but can help us understand the responsibilities that we have, and if there are opportunities for us to rethink those or try to find creative ways to better leverage those to support the vision that you're creating.
It's a great proposal. Do you have anything specific?
I don't, just, you know, the unprecedented needs, the thinking about different rate structures that we talked about. I just want to make sure we're not approaching this with 20th or 20th century thinking and stuck in, no, this is the way we've always done it, therefore this is what needs to be done, and trying to think more creatively again about how we can support DEP in the city and doing what they're trying to do within the powers that we have.
Well, you're certainly right. We are thought of as the rate setting part of DEP. That's what we do.
Yeah.
People don't understand that there are other opportunities for us. We do. We understand. And we're doing other things.
Yeah.
But we're not simply the rate setting component part of DEP. I agree.
So I don't know if you guys have ideas on how we could best do that. Maybe I'll put that as a question of, it's a worthwhile conversation that we'd love to have. Yeah.
We'll circle back with our tree because it does, you know, a lot of it circles around the enabling legislation.
Exactly.
So how much do we want to get into opening that up, and what does that mean for other elements of not just, you know, the DEP and the systems agenda, but the overall administration agenda as well. But I think also some of these things that, you know, we have unfolded to a certain degree, probably the strategic plan, in thinking about future state. What does that mean for, you know, what does a stormwater charge look like? What does different rate scenarios look like? Those are all things that we're going to be contemplating as, especially now since we're starting to get past the shakeout period for the billing system, and we're starting to stabilize on that level as well.
And so I'm hoping that the consultants will come back with, among many other things, some suggestions, as Adam's just asked about, as to what the water board in a new iteration might be able to do to support DEP interests.
Or even in our current iteration, but thinking creatively about how to leverage those responsibilities.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
just putting out there's an openness to that and kind of making sure we're thinking of that question as you're going through your strategic planning process as part of that.
And as Joe points out, I think what I'm hearing you say is there's something around understanding the current legislation and the current powers of the board. Then, of course, you know, a lot of the way we interact is shaped by the lease agreement.
Yeah.
And so understanding those two documents probably is the starting point.
1,000%.
Okay.
We miss Al today.
Yes, that's why I call him out. He's not here to say no. So you get over to the
He
person
can
who
contemplate,
says
we'll give him the
it.
time to contemplate all this.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you for the time. That's all I have. I just thought it's a useful overview, particularly as we get into what we'll have in the next couple of months. And we'll certainly we'll send information about the amnesty. We're going to get that April meeting, and presumably we'll get both the April and May meetings scheduled. So we get those calendared, because obviously those are important meetings to have as full a board as possible. We'll plan to have a full update on the amnesty then, as well as respond to Adam's question.
That diversity.
Yeah.
Let me say for the record, Commissioner, we all know how busy you are. It's great to have you here. It's great to have you give us a presentation. Thank you very much for taking the time. My pleasure. Thank you. Joe Omar, thank you. David, the leader of the Water Finance Authority is here today. Thank you for coming.
Sure.
May I have a motion, please, to adjourn?
So,
Second.
Second.
John, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
We're out.